Okay, good day everyone. So today I'll continue with where I stopped from last week. Last week I talked about inspiration, biblical inspiration and the theories of inspiration. So this week now I'll continue with the canon and process of Old Testament canonization. To start with, most first of all understand what that word canon means and what canonization also means. Now so for canon. Canon is referred to the collection of texts or writings that are considered authoritative and divinely inspired by a particular religious community. While canonization is the process by which texts or writings were recognized as part of the authoritative canon. Now, if you look at your screen, you see that there is a definition there, and it says that the canon is the official list of holy scripture, and it got its origin from the word canon, which means rule or standard. And the purpose of this canon was to define inspired text boundaries. Now, for canonization, like I said earlier in defining them, said canonization is the process by which texts or writings were recognized as part of the authoritative canon. Now, why was the canonization needed? Canonization was needed for preservation, it was needed for unity, it was needed for protection. Preservation in the sense that it protects authentic teachings from distortion, and unity in the sense that it unifies Israelites' belief and practices, and protection in the sense that it safeguards scriptures in crisis period. Now let's move on to stages of OT canonization. Now the stages of OT canonization is divided into three. That's the Torah, which means the law, the prophets, which is the Nevim, and the writings, which is the Ketuvim. Now the Torah, also known as the Pentateuch, was accepted around 400 BCE, and it's the books under this Torah or the Pentateuch is the book of Genesis to Deuteronomy. While for the prophets, which is Nevim, it was accepted during in 200 BCE, and these prophet books include the former prophets and the later prophets, with the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. And for the writing books, which is the Ketuvim, it was accepted or it was recognized in 19 AD by the Council of Jamnia, which formalized the canon. Now, the writing books includes the other books apart from the prophetic books and the book of Genesis to Deuteronomy. So let's move on to the next part. Criteria for canonization, or let's say the process of canonization. The criteria can also be linked to the process of canonization. But first off, let's start with the criteria for canonization. Now, the criteria of canonization varies, but there are some key factors such as the authorship, consistency, and community acceptance. We also have the apostolic origin, the content and message, and the widespread recognition. For the authorship, this the criteria for this authorship was that it has to be written by a prophet or an inspired leader. While for consistency, it has to align with existing scriptures and doctrines in the Bible. And for community acceptance, the scripture or a particular Bible book has to be widely used and acknowledged by religious communities or faith groups. While for the apostolic origin, is also coming in line with the authorship, whereby the texts were often attributed to the apostles or their associates. So let's move on to the next one. That's the quick recap. But before the quick recap, I need to differentiate something. The process of this canonization includes now the process of canonization. This one refers to the historical development and recognition of the authoritative text that comprises the Bible. Now, this process of canonization, also the criteria for canonization, involved several stages. The first stage was the composition, the second is the transmission, third is the recognition, the fourth is the compilation, and the fifth is the standardization. Now, for the composition, it has to do with how the original texts were written by various authors, and it often responds to specific historical and theological contexts. While for the transmission, it has to do with how the texts were copied or edited. For the recognition, it has to do with how the text gained certain recognition. For the compilation, it has to do with how the texts were compiled into collection to form the Old Testament and the New Testament. And for the standardization, it has to do with how the text was accepted as authoritative and others being excluded. So let's have a quick recap on what we've done. We defined what canon is, where I said it refers to a standard list of inspired books, and also we talked about the three stages of the canonization, which is the law, prophets, and the writing, and also the importance or the processes and criteria of the canonization. So these are what we've understand today. We'll move on to the next topic in our next class. See you next time. Thank you.